Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders are advised that this program contains images and voices of people who have died.
Bundjalung Gumerungi. That's a greeting of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation whose lands we are joining you from today. We pay respects to their elders, past and present, as the first storytellers of this land. I'm Isabella Higgins and this is my co-host, Carla Ramby.
We are so excited to be bringing you a special 1-hour program looking at Indigenous perspectives of January 26.
Over the next hour, we're going to bring you incredible stories from First Nations communities from around the country. Stories of strength and survival. We have an amazing array of First Nations reporters and producers working on and off screen. It really is a special show. It sure is. I'll be back later for a conversation with some Indigenous leaders about what January 26 might look like in the future. We'll see you then, Isabella. For Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, our elders are the most important voices we listen to and learn from. Rulla Kelly-Mansell from ABC Adelaide asked elders from across the country to share their thoughts on the day.
I'm here in beautiful Launceston, Tasmania, and I want to acknowledge the Palawa Pakana people as the traditional owners of this beautiful country, Luritja. I want to extend an acknowledgement to all the elders past, present and future, and also acknowledge elders from all around the country. I'm pleased to be able to bring to you and share to you stories of elders from all around the country. Auntie Bessie Coleman, a senior woman and traditional owner of the Kakadu National Park, shares her thoughts of celebrating together.
We should celebrate with Australian and First people. Because now when you look at it, some of our kids come black and then they become white too. So we got to look both ways to make first Australian and our Australian white people so we can be together. I don't know what people think, but that's how I look at it. We all Australian. We should be Australian. Not celebrating for the person that came to Australia. I'd rather they change the date because it gives me goosebumps. It's remind you of slaughtering of Indigenous people. First people used to live in Australia, and when the settlement came in, really it's Indigenous country they came.
I caught up with Annie Rosie Smith from our community, Luritja. I asked her thoughts around celebrations on January 26.
I get so annoyed about why everybody wants to celebrate Australia Day. You know, it's such an insult because it wasn't, you know, a peaceful settlement here. It was complete invasion. You've got to remember, you know, Tasmania has got one of the worst histories of what they did to Aboriginal people here. And not just in the colonial days, but for years they denied that Aboriginal people even existed. You know, my mum was of the era where she wasn't able to identify as being Aboriginal because people thought there was no Aboriginal people in Tasmania. The only way that we can move forward is if the government open their ears and let us have our voice heard.
Powerful words from Annie Rosie Smith, a Tasmanian Aboriginal elder and leader in the community. It's important as young people that we listen to elders that have gone before us to be guided by their wisdom. I caught up with Uncle Mickey O'Brien, a Kaurna elder, to listen and learn about his thoughts surrounding January 26.
Gumerungi, Wangadi, Mundine Bundjalung, Ganiatana, Nari, Kamatpi, Maricha. As a Kaurna person, we say welcome to Kaurna country. Some people will say it's obviously Australia Day. Some people will say it's Survival Day or Mourning Day or Treaty Day or Sovereignty Day or First Fleet Day or Invasion Day or And so it has so many different names and it means so much to so many different people, and I think it's important that we are celebrating all Australians. But that still means that we need to have those changes for Aboriginal people. And we sadly have now a small percentage of our nation's people, you know, where we're, you know, somewhere between 3 and 5% of the nation. And so therefore for us to get great change, we have to really get 50% of the people to think about the Aboriginal people. So for me, I think by educating and by getting people to love and share in our culture, I think that's a way forward to getting them to get real change for Aboriginal people, and particularly when they then start to consider what Australia Day and the day that it's held on, what it really does do and affect not just all people, but particularly the First Nations people, being the Aboriginal people. Yeah.
That was ABC reporter Rulla Kelly-Mansell talking to elders Auntie Bessie Coleman, Uncle Mickey O'Brien and Auntie Rosie Smith. As those elders pointed out, the conversations about January 26 have been going on for decades. In fact, it was in 1938 when the Aboriginal Progressive Association declared January 26 the day of mourning. With the support of the Australian Aborigines League from Victoria, they organised a protest march and congress in Sydney. That first organised march had around 100 people attend, but in recent years, support has reached record numbers and continues to grow year on year, including a huge rise in non-Indigenous Australians participating. ABC Northwest reporter Gary John Lysart caught up with Brisbane and Sydney march organisers who speak to the importance and growth of these continuing protests.
Hi Carla, it's good to be with you today. I'd like to start off by paying my respects to the Nukunnu people, who are the traditional owners of the land here in Port Pirie and surrounding areas, and acknowledge their continued connection to land, sea and culture. Last year, more than 100,000 people attended marches in both capital cities and regional areas, making them the single biggest event of January 26. To learn more about the growth of these events, I caught up with organisers across the country.
Everything bad that has happened to our mob is a result of the 26th of January. This is why this date is so important, because it speaks to the scars, whether that's physical, like mental, spiritual, that Aboriginal people, carry every day. I think one of the reasons why non-Indigenous peoples are taking part is because they're just sick of sort of the history that they're told about Aboriginal people and about themselves and about how this country was founded. We see Aboriginal communities, we see Aboriginal sacred sites, we see places all over the country getting destroyed for profit. People are angry, people are upset, people don't want this to continue, so that's why they come out and support. As important as, the broader Australian public may perceive the Australia Day celebrations, Aboriginal people have been participating in protest and organising against, this day, since 1938. We need to look at our history and what Aboriginal people have been saying for the last 130 years or for the last 250 years, is we want justice. And that's sort of at the centrepiece of everything that we do.
Linda June Coe is the lead organiser for the Sydney marches, and she told me why it's important for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people to continue marching on January 26.
The Invasion Day marches are important because they essentially still highlight the ongoing injustices that Indigenous peoples face here in Australia. Our mob are the highest incarcerated people on the planet. We have the highest growing suicide rate amongst our men, and these symptoms are actually a part of a bigger problem that Australia still has to face up to, and that's its mistreatment towards our people in the plight of actually continuing the theft of our lands. People participate from all different backgrounds. Obviously the march is Indigenous-led, but we also have a strong ally group there in Sydney, as well as international support bodies as well, such as refugee groups, immigrants who are facing the same oppression from this capitalist colonial system. The 26th of January is also a day of mourning for our people. We don't celebrate it. We remember our mob. We remember the resistance that our ancestors fought. And it's a day of reflecting, but it's also a day of realising that we still have a long way to go in terms of ensuring the future survival of our people.
Ways you can support your local First Nations communities can be found at abc.net.au/walkingtogether.
Gary John Lysart with that report. And if any of those pictures of the day of mourning and early marches resonate with you, please let us know via our ABC Indigenous Facebook page. Mikaela Simpson has spoken to march organisers at Civic Park in Darwin.
Yeah, hey guys, I'm here on Larrakia country at Civic Park in Darwin, where the march has just wrapped up. There's been about 1,500 people or more actually turn out for this amazing event. No weather could stop us, and here we are, we're all celebrating. You can hear the band in the background. There's a barbecue going, face painting, traditional painting, and so much more that is happening. Now, I am with the three incredible young women who have actually organised this event. First ladies, hi, congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now, I know that you've organised marches in the past, but this is the first Invasion Survival Day march that you've organised. Tell me about why you wanted to be a part of this particular event.
Well, Jessie had started organising the Survival Day event. This is the 5th year that we've done a Survival Day event, which looks similar to what you see in the background. And then this year we wanted to add the protest element because we really wanted to help people take to the streets and show the movement of people.
There was a massive turnout of all different colours, backgrounds, races, all of that. I noticed there's a really large non-Indigenous population as well. How do you feel about those allies?
Well, it just makes sense, you know. Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander people only make 3% of this country. So, you know, for these events to go ahead, we need the support of our allies to be here. And, you know, seeing them here supporting, and we know that they're going to go out and educate their people about what's happening here today. So we're very happy to see them.
Excellent. Are you noticing more and more non-Indigenous people turning up to help support events like this?
Yes, definitely. Yeah, I think more people are having the message reach them, they're accepting it, and they're coming along to support what we're doing here.
It's still a really divided conversation between some members of our community. What message do you think they're not hearing from you that they could better understand that might make them change their mind on your conversation?
I feel like now people are still happy to sort of sit in their ignorance quite a bit. They don't want to fact check to find out the truth. I think that the message is well and truly out there at the start. I feel like it wasn't, especially for people in the Northern Territory. But now that it is out there, I feel like people just need to look and reflect on themselves and learn how to change their perspective on the world. Yeah.
And to everybody else who's marching around the country or couldn't march because of, you know, COVID and everything that's happened, what do you want to say to all of those folks as well?
We love you guys.
Yeah, we love you.
We're all here with you, and we all have the same goal in the end.
For many Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, today is an opportunity to celebrate the survival of our people and culture. We asked ABC reporter Tani Jash to take a look at how communities are coming together to share the day.
Hi, I'm Tani Jash and I'm on Gadigal country, coming to you from Victoria Park, where the Sydney Invasion Day marches end and Yabun Festival begins. I've been coming to Yabun Festival for many years now and would say it's a key event on the Koori calendar. What I love most about Yabun is the energy and the atmosphere of the day. Despite being held on a day of hurt and pain, Yabun is an inclusive and collaborative event that showcases the beauty and strength of our community and culture. Yabun has grown into one of our biggest Survival Day events, but I wanted to see what else happens across the country on this day of mourning.
The meaning behind the Ballarat Dawn ceremony is to reflect on what January 26 does represent for Aboriginal people across Australia. Ballarat is surrounded by orphanages which unfortunately housed a lot of our community members over a long period of time due to stolen generation. And unfortunately, the transgenerational trauma that comes with that, our people are still facing today. But I think having the ability to be able to change the narrative of these events that we are running as a group is something really positive for the community. We want to make sure that people are educated to be able to make decisions on what January 26 does represent, not just for Aboriginal people, but also non-Aboriginal people, so that we can walk together in unity. So I think that the more that we have these events will open up that respectful conversation about taking something positive away from something that's so negative for our people.
On the other side of the country in Perth, elders in the community came up with a unique idea to share the story of the Whadjuk Noongar people.
The Shining the Light concept is about us as Aboriginal people and not Aboriginal people, focusing on the icon of the city, which is our river. We'll be doing some storytelling about how important it is for us to be able to express ourselves through a catch cry that's gaining momentum, I think, and that's truth-telling. And from that truth-telling will come a huge amount of healing for everybody. And everyone has a story, and together that makes one great big story. And that takes us firmly into the realm of when the tall ships first came, with the new people that intended to stay, and this place was settled and colonised. A story that I always share called The Carers of Everything, in relation to how we understand this country, and it's part of us and we're part of it.
Incredible scenes from the Shining the Light event and powerful words from Uncle Noel about how we can move forward together. For me, January 26 is about the truth-telling of our past. It's also about respecting and celebrating the oldest surviving culture in the world. So let's continue this conversation and learn more about the history of our country so we can create a future we can all be proud of.
Beautiful words there from Tani Jash. As you just saw, performance and storytelling are a centrepiece of our culture. For Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, our music speaks to our struggles and triumph. Gomeroi singer Lauren Ryan writes songs in her Kamilaroi language. A number of her songs have been featured in the original 100. Let's get to Lauren performing one of these songs, Yilalu, on the Golden Guitar stage in Tamworth. Yilalu means in the by and by in Lauren's language.
Before long, we'll be singing the same song. We can't rewrite our wrongs, but we can be better today. And in the end, when I'm looking for a friend, together we can lend our voices and sing strong. We are here for so little time, under one sky, on dust and dirt, trails on a beach washed away by the tide. We are just a grain in the sands of time. Whirlwinds spin, rivers run dry, the sun turns red in the sunset sky. Let's leave some things untouched, little hidden treasures that don't belong as embers. Forever they should grow. Before long, we'll be singing the same song. We can't rewrite our wrongs, but we can be better today. And in the end, when I'm looking for a friend, together we can lend our voices and sing strong. Yilalu, 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 yilalu. Don't look away, don't make yourself blind. Don't wait till it's too late to open up your mind. One good way to end these petty fights as if you learn my name and not a stereotype. Whirlwinds spin, rivers run dry, the sun turns red in the sunset sky. Let's leave some things untouched, little hidden treasures that don't belong as embers. Forever they should grow before long. We'll be singing the same song. We can't rewrite our wrongs, but we can be better today. And in the end, when I'm looking for a friend, together we can lend our voices and sing strong. Yilalu, 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 yilalu,
Oh, what an absolutely stellar performance from Lauren Ryan.
Lauren is just one of the many young First Nations performers who are using their talents to shift conversations and change attitudes.
In a moment, Isabella's going to lead a panel discussion with some experts in their field about the state of reconciliation in this country and what can be done to unite Australians. But first, let's take a look at how Australia has been spending this January 26.
Walk out that door and see what it's like to be stereotyped and racially vilified living black in a white man's eyes. All while decolonising these history books which are full of lies told by one side, forgetting the part where they brutalised, burglarised, terrorised and intergenerationally traumatised my people.
For years, we have walked on a one-way street to learn white people's way. I've learned to walk in two worlds and live in towns and cities. Now is the time for you to come closer to understand us. Personally, I believe I don't own the land. We belong into it.
When anything that is severed can be healed, can be reconnected. Our culture is us. This dance is us. But our culture and this dance is also you. Yeah!
Well, we're now lucky enough to have three fantastic First Nations leaders joining us today, and we're going to take a look at what Australia Day might look like in the future. We have Karen Mundine, Chief Executive of Reconciliation Australia, Wesley Enoch, a Quandamooka man and Artistic Director for Sydney Festival, and joining us in Melbourne, Chief Executive of First Nations Media, Arrentre woman and Luritja woman, Catherine Liddle. Now, we just heard a little bit about all these views on January 26th, how diverse the views are of our mob, and I'm going to do a quick spin around. I'm going to start with you, Karen. Is January 26th the best day to mark our national holiday?
Look, I think it's a complicated question, but I think there are some really simple answers to it all. I find it astounding that we celebrate our National Day on a day that is about dispossession of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. It makes it hard for us to get to this idea of a reconciled place when First Peoples are left out of that conversation and can't engage in the way that many of us do want to actually be part of.
And Wesley, what about you? How do you spend the day?
Well, how I spend the day is often doing this, telling alternate narratives, which are to give us a broader sense of the storytelling. But it's a weird thing too, because if you remove the date, you also remove the necessity to talk about colonisation and our survival. So I've got a very complex sense of, I want to say, actually, colonisation hasn't finished and we still need to talk about it and we still need to kind of rectify some of the issues that have happened over the last 200 and something years. But if you remove the date, do you just remove the spur to keep talking about it? So it's quite complex for me as well.
It is complicated, and we hear often, well, today at the protest, many who said they'd like to see the date change, but then very much we hear from other people in the community who say they would like to keep it. Catherine, I'm going to move to you and ask you, do you feel proud on January 26th to be an Australian?
You know what, I'm proud to be an Australian every single day, and I think that's part of intrinsically being an Aboriginal person. You know, we're brought up to be proud of our nations, and obviously Australia is a critical part of that. But do I approach Australia Day with a level of trepidation? Absolutely. And a lot of that, again, is about understanding connection to your country and connection to your nations, because while I come from the central desert regions, you know, we totally get the disruption that people, particularly on the eastern coasts, feel around this part of time, and we understand the pain and the loss. So I have a very complex relationship with this particular day and how we celebrate it. But I'd also like to just reinforce what Karen had to say there, and that is there are some simple solutions to this.
Well, before we get into that, we're going to take a look at someone who's been researching January 26 about our National Day, and we're going to take a look at how we compare to other countries with a similar history. I spoke to Steve Hodder-Watt, who is a broadcaster and has also been researching this issue.
Australia, it's the only one Commonwealth country out of the 53 Commonwealth countries that actually celebrates or has its National Day as the date of invasion, occupation or settlement, colonisations. With Columbus Day changing, you know, that took around at least 40 years. It is really sort of the clashing of cultures. Are we just coming into this just to have for something to whinge at, or, you know, are we just coming to spoil the party? Yeah, I guess personally I feel conflicted, but I guess that's similar for a lot of people or the nation itself as far as what the date means. We seem to be winning support, hearts and minds as far as getting people to think about the issue of what January 26 means for First Nations peoples.
Well, Karen, we just heard other similar countries mark their National Day quite differently. Does holding Australia Day on January 26 stifle reconciliation, in your opinion?
I'm not sure about that it stifles reconciliation. It makes it a trickier conversation to move forward. But I think Wesley's point around, I think we jump to this, we need to fix this before we sit with actually what are people saying? What are Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people want when we say we need to change the date? And really that's about we need to reckon with our past. We need to reckon with what happened or what is signified by the 26th of January, which was our dispossession, which was the destruction of our cultures and our ways of being and doing. As a nation, we need to reckon with that before we can move forward. So sure, we could change the date, but we haven't resolved that conversation and that relationship piece. And I think a bit like you know, it's that tension point of, okay, we can move it away and stop talking about it, but we need to keep talking about it.
But also, we have no ceremonies around it either. I mean, this is a kind of a very modern thing, Australia Day happening on the 26th of January.
Only since 1994.
1994.
Yep.
In fact, Mariah Carey's song All I Want for Christmas is the same year.
Oh,
so you get a sense of going, is that really what it's about?
But that's a classic.
It's a classic, yes. But I think the idea of going, what we need to do is go, in the way that Anzac Day has been approached, and we've been talking about this for a number of years now, what are the ceremonies and rituals of the day? Now, whether it's on the 26th of January or not, we need some kind of national format, some kind of way of saying how do we as a nation work our way through it. And that's what the vigil was at Sydney Festival, the sense of saying, actually, we need to sit vigil on the day before as a way of, I don't know, giving ourselves some calm reflection.
So I guess you're sort of saying, rather than it being this celebratory day, you'd like to see it much more as a commemoration.
Yeah, and I think that what it has become for many Australians, not just blackfellas but also whitefellas, is a moment of going, let's question what our identity is. Let's just not take it as it's a flag-waving thing, but a moment where we can go, let's step back and think, what are the questions I need to ask about being Australian?
There were definitely some flags on the street that I saw today. I'll let you know.
Well, I'm going to wear this flag for that reason too.
It was a different flag I saw earlier. I'm going to go to you, Catherine. You said you also had some solutions, or what you thought to be simple solutions. What are they?
Oh, well, the first one is absolutely having those conversations and acknowledging that the day is complex. But I think also underlaying, and I think actually Wesley framed it really well, we need different ways of managing it and different ways of listening to the stories. And watching that vision just before, I know that I was recognising some of the people in the vision as they danced. And I tell you what, geez, that made me feel proud to see them there and dealing with how they understand Australia Day in the way that they did, and that is to get out there and be part of it, but do it in a way that says, listen, we're still here and we recognise that this is something that is happening. We recognise that Australia needs a national day of celebration, but can we do it differently? How do we partake in this, and how do people engage with us as we do it? But I think, again, getting back to the more complex part of that is underlying it, those complex conversations have to happen as well, because it is a challenging it's a challenging idea to think about changing something on the run, and that's just the way it is. It's never easy. Changes. We're dealing with dinosaurs and car parks. So if you move the dinosaur this way, you're going to bump something else, and everyone will go back and say, well, hang on, didn't we just have a chat about changing the date? But this is still happening over there. So while I say it's simple, it is also looking at the bigger problem and the bigger issues and saying, well, what happens if we move A? What happens to B? What happens to C? And that, again, reflects what we're talking about. We didn't get here without the need to understand all those steps that got us here in the first place.
Just to add in there too, just because it may start as a commemoration like in the morning with Anzac Day, doesn't mean you can't end with a two-up game.
Yeah.
That throughout the day there can be a different sets of rituals and conversations that take us from one thing to the next.
So you're still looking forward to a barbecue at the end of the day?
Well, or a moment that you share with family, and you bring people, friends and family together, and you have a shared conversation over a barbecue. That can still occur, I think.
As I was saying, when I was out and about today, I saw, the people as you expect, dressed in the Aussie flag, wearing it as capes. We do polling every year around views on the day, and some of those polls suggest that the majority of Australians are more than happy to celebrate on January the 26th. Do you think we need 50% of the population to want to change the way we do the day, or change the day before we think about making those changes?
Well, I think the word there is think, isn't it? Are people really thinking about what the day means, or are they just going, oh, isn't it great to have a public holiday at the end of January as a summer celebration before I go back to work? People might love the idea of a celebration and a day off because we're Australians. That's it's in our DNA. Yeah. But if they go in and go, let's break it down and why, and that's why the whole panel's saying this. The ability to analyse the conversation and for everyone to have access to that conversation, and for not to be alienating, because I think that's often what happens too. We sometimes think that change the date is just a blackfella conversation, when in fact I see mostly white fellas getting up there and really making a big song and dance of it as well.
I certainly saw a lot of non-Indigenous
people
at the protest today. I guess, Karen, this is kind of your specialty, reconciliation. Do you, I guess in your time in the chair at Reconciliation Australia, have you seen a changing of attitudes towards Australia Day?
Yeah, we certainly have. So we've been doing the Australian Reconciliation Barometer for about 20 years now. And what we're seeing is more and more people are engaging around the concepts of reconciliation. So we've got about 95% of the general community who think that the relationship between First Nations and other Australians is important, and it's important to our identity as Australians. What we've also seen in the last couple of years is some really basic facts like believing that the stolen generations happened, understanding and knowing that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people didn't have voting rights until the 1960s. We've seen increases over the years of that. So people are educating themselves, they're learning more. We're having more of these conversations than we ever have before. And while some people might say it's being divisive, I actually think it's an important step it's part of being mature, of us growing. We are coming at this from different angles. We need to hear each other. We need to listen to each other if we're actually to move forward.
And Catherine, I'm going to come to you because in this conversation we tend to talk about it a lot as Indigenous or non-Indigenous, but as we referenced, there is great diversity within the Indigenous population about how to spend this day. If we changed the date of the Australia Day, if it moved away from January 26, do you think you would see more First Nations people who are comfortable with celebrating the day?
Yeah, actually, I reckon you do. And I think if you're thinking about it, if we take it back to simple terms, what would be the impact of changing the date on anyone, really, except for us as a healing nation and us as Indigenous people? You would actually take a level of harm away from, you know, the First Nations people. And I tell you what, we love our country. We absolutely love our country. So, you know, what's the harm? What's the harm in moving that date? I think you would see more people engage with it. And I think in some ways, this period of time is when I'm most proud to be a representative of the media sector, because creative industries are the industries that shape our culture. You know, in particular media, you know, we give people the information that they need to understand what's happening around them, and we give people the information that they need to be able to reconcile when they're feeling conflicted, and to understand that maybe at this point in time you're not the only person feeling conflicted, and again being able to sample it from different pieces of work and from different personalities is just so critical. So I think all of those things are absolutely possible, and when I think about, you know, the simplest solution is understand that what would be the harm in changing the date.
And I'm interested to hear, because when I've been around the grounds today, people often use the word exhausting when they talk about January 26, about Australia Day. Exhausting because of the debate, or perhaps some of the artists I saw today said it's the busiest day of the year for them. They're absolutely booked
here
out.
in NAIDOC week. Yeah. It's kind of like everyone wants to say, everyone wants to get in there. I think taking Catherine's point too, the idea that there is no cost in this, and Grace Tame talking in a similar way, there is no cost in this to anyone. It's not even a long tradition. So what is it that people might be holding on to on the 26th of January, and why are they fearful is a bigger question as well.
What do you reckon they're holding on to, Karen?
I think I don't think they understand completely. I think, as Wesley said before, there's this idea that it's a long weekend at the end of January, and it kind of is that marker of the end of summer, and I think people rail against this idea that they're being told what to think, and so that kind of puts defences up, and it stifles or hampers people actually listening and hearing what's being asked. But again, I think there are opportunities for this to be a different conversation if we approach it in the right way.
Well, for some communities, January 26 is an opportunity to share the truth about the impacts of colonisation, especially some of the stories that were often left out of books or classrooms. I caught up with Yessi Mosby, a community leader from the Torres Strait who is fighting to save his homeland and preserve his culture and language.
My name is Yessi Mosby. I'm from the central Torres Strait, Kulkalgal tribe. I am the child of the morning star. My wind is the southeast wind. My totems is the crocodile and the eagle. I am from the village of the clan of Gudumad here on Masig, which is situated in the central part of Torres Strait. We are carrying burdens on our shoulders because of the climate change. We have a lot of inundation and erosion which affects us so much. It's affect our people, affect our community. We have a lot of our family remains, which used to be buried inland, is now being taken away by the sea. Some of us now, they lost their genealogy. I'm saying physically that their family loved one remains has been washed away. It affects us mentally, spiritually, and physically. It affects us in such a way that we cannot try and prevent this thing to happen. It's just getting worse every year.
Well, we just heard about what some people in the Torres Strait are doing to try and preserve their special cultural sites. I guess this year last year now, we've really seen this debate around cultural heritage protection, around Juukan Gorge really blow up in the media, but also in the public. Karen, do you think that shows that there is a changing attitude within Australia, or a changing appetite to want to learn about Indigenous histories, but also have a bit of ownership over it and be proud of it?
I think absolutely it's about that ownership and understanding that people actually have a role to play in this and that there are things that people can do. So I think what was the most interesting thing that came out of it is not only did it cause such uproar, and as an Aboriginal person it was, you know, for me, but it kept going, and I think that's something that what people were surprised at. And I think when we saw the shareholders within the company actually say, actually, we have agency here. These are the things that we believe in and these are the things we want to invest in, and so we have power here. And I think that's a different thing that we've never seen before. And again, I think it's because we've started these conversations. We've been doing reconciliation for 30 years in a formal sense, 20 years as RA. People are educating themselves more. We've moved on. We understand the nuances. We understand the history. And people that are now in those decision-making positions actually can influence change.
Catherine, you're a First Nations woman from the Northern Territory, and we often hear about how climate change will affect communities in some parts of the country there. How do you feel when you hear about what these people in the Torres Strait are going through, or what Yessi Mosby's trying to do to protect his homeland?
Oh, look, you feel it here, right? Your heart breaks for them, because when you're talking about the ancestors, you know, our ancestors never leave us, and it's our responsibility to look after them. It's our responsibility to look after country. But also in the Northern Territory, you know, we're in an interesting state where a lot of the things that you see happening on the eastern coast, those areas that were affected by colonisation first, they're starting to come to us. We're a little bit behind because, you know, colonisation was a bit later. So we have a lot of our languages still very, very vibrant. But don't get me wrong, we're losing some, and we're losing them at exponential rates. My Nana's language, Pradam, highly vulnerable. My grandfather's language, the one that belongs to Alice Springs, almost gone. And we know that there have been significant interruptions to that. We also know that there's significant interruptions not only to maintaining our land so that our cultural heritage is there, but to maintain those lands you also need the cultural songs, the cultural stories. They need singers, and to get singers you need time in the chair, so as to speak. You don't become a law person overnight. You don't learn that song overnight. It takes years and years and years and years of practice, and yet our elders are dying faster than we are able to get that information to us. And the structures that we live in at the moment, you know, they are instruments of colonisation. You know, even the camera, the walls, the floors, the windows, they're all instruments of colonisation. We learn by sitting down in the sand, and certainly for me, as an Aboriginal woman, my job is to learn from my grandmother, sitting next to my grandmother. That's how the song is handed down. So getting the time to be able to learn those things, to be able to share them, and the incredible knowledges that protect the country and protect our well-being that go with them, that takes time. That means, you know, for someone like me, I mean, I took 2 years off work to be able to do that, but not everyone has the opportunity to do that. And we're still not really good at making sure that I guess the tools that we use now, that our jobs, our workplaces, our environments, all the Australian culture has enabled us to be able to, I guess, live in this world, but maintain that world, and the incredible knowledges that come with it, particularly around how you look after this country and how you look after yourself, and how you withstand change.
Can I ask you guys, because that was quite powerful, how, I mean, as Catherine said, we are First Nations people, but we very much live in a Western world. Have you had your own pursuits or journeys of trying to reconnect and reclaim what's been lost through the generations?
Yeah, I mean, my next move after the Sydney Festival is to move home, move back onto Minjerribah and be closer to a whole lot of art and cultural practice there. But just even to talk, what we need is a structural shift. This idea of how we can kind of, well, and ultimately we talk about the voice to Parliament. How do we structurally change the society that we're in now and make sure that we have a line of communication into the decision-making and policy-making bodies of this nation? When we had ATSIC before and that was, you know, pulled apart and all those kind of things, why it needs to be enshrined in the Constitution is to make sure it doesn't become at the whim of whatever government is at the time or whatever policymaker decides. If it's in the Constitution, they will not get rid of it. And so, yes, I think we have to make individual choices. I'm with Catherine on this about how we're spending the time, but also how do we make sure there is structural time for all all First Nations people and, in fact, non-First Nations people to connect to the cultural inheritance of this country.
Well, we've heard from Catherine about the great personal cost it takes for people to reconnect because of the lives that we've lived. Karen, can you talk to us? It sounded like you had something to say.
Yeah, no, look, I would love to have more time to spend on country, and particularly because when I'm on country, I have no mobile phone service, so it forces me to disconnect and to be on country. But as Wesley was saying, I think it's really important that the broader Australian community, its structures, its institutions, start to move and think a bit more around Aboriginal ways of thinking, being and doing. And that's a lot of what we try to do through Reconciliation Australia, and particularly through Reconciliation Action Plans. It's not just thinking about what you as a business who, employ people or educate people can do, but actually put yourself in our shoes. Put yourself and think about it differently, because not only is there this huge audience in terms of First Nations people, but there may be this problem solving or thinking about things differently that is going to be good for your business, that is going to help you in this 21st century to think of things differently, which we kind of need, like given the year we've just had, right?
But even the fires, I mean, this whole idea, if we can actually overturn the whole deficit model and say we have knowledges that'll actually help you live in this country more, and the bushfires were the clearest example of the bushfire, cultural burning technology which has come up to the fore now. You go, actually, we've known this for millennia, folks. Welcome to the party.
Yeah.
That
is an interesting conversation, because you do hear non-Indigenous people a lot of the time asking how they can learn this stuff. How do you teach adults once you're outside of classrooms? Is it through policy? Is it through the media? Is it through the arts? What's your opinion?
Oh, look, I think it's all of those things.
Yeah.
One of the really interesting things we found was that we work with about 1,300 schools and early learning services, and it's a great entry point because it's not just the kids that are learning. They bring it back. The whole family gets to learn together. Aunties, uncles, parents, cousins, grandparents get involved, and they start to learn things, particularly if it's around kind of where they live and the communities that they're involved in. There are so many great things. I mean, Sydney Festival, there are so many arts engagements out there. There's so much great TV. Like, you don't have to look far to educate yourself.
Yeah, I think it's a frame of mind too. You said, how do adults learn?
Yeah.
I'm a hairy, big man. I have to be like a boy to go learn.
Yeah.
You actually have to give over the status that you think you have from the university and the grown-up 50-year-old man, and I have to be like a boy. And that's an amazing challenge for someone who thinks they know everything to say, I know nothing.
Catherine, what do you think? How do you educate non-Indigenous people who left the classroom a long time ago about this sort of stuff?
Yeah, look, I think Wesley and Karen have nailed it actually, because it's not one thing. It's changing a whole collective of instruments and using your personal agency, but your business agency and your collective agency to have these conversations. And I've been very, very privileged actually in my working life, because one of the institutions I worked with, Jarwin, would work with corporate agencies who were looking for ways to, I guess, better connect with Indigenous Australians and support Indigenous organisations and corporations and all those sorts of things. And one of the things they would do was bring in people who pretty much had no exposure to us and take everything away, take the power away and say, here you go, here's your community agency, now work your butts off. And there's a lot of reconciliation that goes on during those periods of time, understanding. And I know a lot of the conversations I'd have during that period of time when we were looking after secondees would be like, it doesn't make sense. What we're seeing here doesn't make sense. And that obviously is the connection piece. That is the fact that there are elements of the story that are still missing, and it's not until you get people into that environment where it goes click, 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 hang on, maybe I'm missing something here. And without fail, these people go back into the world, they go back with a new set of skills, they go back with a different understanding of resilience and a whole different understanding of looking at how you might solve a problem, and they become better people and better for their work environment. So that's one option. But that, engaging with media platforms like this and being interested and listening to your kids, because you know what? Kids get it. They get it, and they get it really fast.
And I know that we're just getting into it there, but we're running out of time, so I'm going to have to wrap up. One final question, and it's for you, Karen, because Reconciliation Australia, they put out a reconciliation barometer, and it said attitudes were changing, more people wanted to learn about our history. And you then said that national leadership needs to happen and they need to take brave action quickly, because we're running out of time. What is brave action?
Look, safe to brave, brave means different things to different people. It's about pushing yourself. It's about when you think you know it all, there's more to learn. It's about putting yourself into other people's shoes. Brave action is, let's talk about the voice to Parliament. Let's talk about real structural change that gives Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people governance and agency in their lives and in their communities. And that's when we'll see change.
Wesley, you want to say something?
Oh, I'm just thinking on a very personal note, I know I've been challenging people to say, if you don't know the people where you're living or the people of where you were born, just find out that. Find out the language name of the people and the place in which you were born and where you've chosen to live now. And then challenge yourself to go, actually, who's my totem? You may not have been born with a totem, but who is the ancestral animal? Who's the animal or the plant that you will look after for the rest of your life? Now, very simple personal things, but they're in an Indigenous perspective that they can carry on into their personal life. And weirdly, it does change from within as soon as you do those few little steps.
And Catherine, do you have any things that you think non-Indigenous people can do, simple things like that, to walk this path of reconciliation?
Oh, absolutely. And I think the first one is and it's, again, it gets a bit, I'm saying it's simple, it's not, it's to understand not to be afraid of change. Change doesn't hurt. You never know where it's going to take you. So get out there, understand, find out the stories of your country, find out who the TOs are. Find out a little bit about the history before colonisation and really celebrate with us. And don't be afraid. Don't be afraid.
Don't expect us all to agree either.
Yeah. That's right.
We won't all agree.
We're a democracy
That's right.
like everyone else.
That's right.
It's 50%. Well, that's about all we have time for. I was having a lot of fun, but unfortunately, that's the end of this program. Thank you so much for joining us for this special broadcast. We're going to leave you with some music from Luke O'Shea and Kevin Bennett with their award-winning song, Happy Australia Day. They wrote it with the hope that everyday Australians will at the very least hear and learn the names of 9 iconic Indigenous people. Here they are now with their Golden Guitar Award Show performance.
Cowboys versus Indians, white men versus savages, is what I was shown on TV. I knew more about the world wars, the Zulu, the Navajo, than I did of my own history. Yes, but as you begin to uncover the sin, you can feel your heart drowning in shame. It all starts with a lie we no longer deny, but it's time we all knew your name. So come away, are you still fighting? When you die, your song we shall sing. And for all your senseless suffering, Sugarnitty, did it mean anything? For every chain that has bound you, for every child stolen away, well, the river still runs from the same poison well. Happy Australia Day, Australia Day. Well, the wheel it still turns, but the memory still burns, and there's still so much more left to write. Yeah, but if I'm a man who was born on this land, then my history is both black and white. So Yagan, are you still fighting? Chandamara, your song we shall sing. And for all you absorbed as you traveled the world, been alone, did it mean anything? For every shot was fired, intending to drive you away. Well, the river still runs from the same poison well. Happy Australia Day, Australia Day. Let the truth fill the space in between us. replacing the blame and the fear. And what we must learn first, we are better than our worst, and respect for each other starts here.
So why celebrate our great nation on a day that insults and divides? For regardless of clan, we all love this land.
Find a way where we stand unified. Charlie Perkins, I'll stand beside you.
Uncle Jimmy, your song I shall sing.
And for all your selfless suffering, Mum Shell,
well, I feel everything.
For every right that's denied us, for our children all stolen away. Well, everyone drinks from the same poison well, and it's time that we all share the pain. Yes, everyone drinks from the same poison well. Happy Australia Day, Australia Day.